second graders. I am so incredibly excited to start this chapter book. It was one of Zoe's Rescue Zoo books. I remember when I got them, people were so excited. I know some people have read some of them. I read this one, I started it, I should say, when we did the Drop Everything and Read the week of Dr. Seuss's birthday. And I read a few chapters and I loved it. So I decided this would be our next read aloud. It is absolutely adorable from the few chapters that I've read. So I think you guys are going to really like it. And if you haven't read any of these before, Zoe lives at a rescue zoo where they rescue animals. And for some reason, she is able to talk to animals that no one else can and no one else knows. So it's really interesting. And this one happens to be called the Eager Elephant with a baby elephant. So this one is chapter 1, Meep Gets into Mischief. Zoe Parker wrinkled her nose and squeezed her eyes tightly shut. Achoo! She sneezed as dust went up her nose. Achoo! Zoe was raking up the minty-smelling leaves in the koala enclosure at her rescue zoo. All around her, tall green trees stretched up from the dusty, pebbly ground. Every time Zoe moved her rake, a small cloud of dust poofed into the air and straight up her nose. As the branches above her head shook, Zoe glanced up. Perched in the tree was Matilda, one of the koalas. You can kind of see it in the picture. Zoe thought she was one of the cuddliest animals at the rescue zoo, with her soft gray fur, cute black nose, and big fluffy ears. But right now, Matilda didn't look at all cuddly. She looked angry. The koala gave a noisy chatter, and a tiny creature scampered out of the trees and shot down the tree trunk. He stuck his pink tongue out at Matilda before leaping onto Zoe's shoulder. Meep, Zoe said, grinning at the little mouse, Lemur. Meep was her very best friend. He was so small he could easily ride on Zoe's shoulder, and he was always getting into mischief. The koala chattered again angrily, and Zoe looked up in time to see her fluffy bottom disappear further up the tree. Zoe giggled. Being with all the animals was her favorite thing about her zoo home, even when they were angry. This one doesn't have a picture. Zoe was very lucky because she lived at the rescue zoo. Her great uncle Horace was the zoo owner and knew almost everything about animals. Zoe didn't see him very often because he spent a lot of time traveling around the world looking for animals that needed help. Whenever he found an animal in trouble or without a home, he brought them back to live at the rescue zoo. Zoe's mom, Lucy, was the zoo vet, and she and Zoe lived in a cottage on the edge of the zoo. Matilda shook her furry head and chattered angrily again at Meep and Zoe. And Zoe smiled. You're right, Matilda, she replied. Meep is the naughtiest lemur I've ever met, too. Living at the rescue zoo was the first exciting thing about Zoe. But the second thing was even more special. Zoe knew a very big secret. Animals can understand what people say and talk to them all the time. But only a few lucky people can actually talk back to them. Zoe was one of those special people. Ever since her 6th birthday, she had understood every growl, grunt, squeak, and roar that animals made. But she could never tell anyone her secret, not even her family. What were you doing this time, Meep? Asked Zoe as the lemur snuggled into her shoulder. I wasn't doing anything naughty, Zoe, Meep complained grumpily. I just wanted to try one of Matilda's special leaves. They look so green and juicy and they smell so nice. But I had one tiny bite, and then I spat it out. It tasted horrible. Oh, Meep, Zoe sighed. Those are eucalyptus leaves, and they're poisonous to most animals. They would have made you very sick. Matilda can eat them because koalas have special tummies that protect them. She was just trying to help you. She smiled up at Matilda. Thank you, she told the koala gratefully. No wonder you were upset with silly Meep. Matilda nodded her furry head and quickly chattered back. No, I'm sure he won't do it again, Zoe replied. Will you, Meep? Meep's big golden eyes were wide as he shook his head. I'll stick to bananas from now on, and apples, and maybe nuts too, and sunflower seeds. Zoe giggled as Meep started listing all the foods he liked. Meep was a little animal with a big appetite. Up in the tree, Matilda suddenly gave an excited squeak and began chattering eagerly. What is it? Zoe asked curiously. Let's go and see, chirped Meep, bounding nimbly back up the tree. Zoe quickly grabbed the lowest branches and pulled herself up to where Matilda was sitting. She wasn't as good at climbing as koalas or Meep, but she was still the best in her class. She had a lot of practice playing with her animal friends. Peering through the leaves over the top of the wooden enclosure, Zoe saw a bright yellow Jeep rumbling slowly through the zoo gates. It was very dusty with big muddy wheels and looked like it had traveled a long way. The back of the Jeep was open and flat, without a roof or any seats, and a large wooden crate was strapped onto it. Zoe heard a lot of noise as the other zoo animals spotted the Jeep. The grizzly bears growled curiously, the turtles swam to the edge of their lagoon enclosure, and Oscar, the friendly African elephant, lifted his big trunk in the air and gave a noisy trumpet. As the Jeep got closer, Zoe could see something through the dirt on the door. There was a familiar logo painted there, a hot air balloon, the symbol of the rescue zoo. Zoe's heart gave a big thump of excitement. It's Uncle Horace, she gasped, and he's back from his safari trip, and he's brought a new animal for the rescue zoo. Well, and that's the end of chapter 1, and you can see their emblem on the front cover, their hot air balloon. So the question is, what would you imagine is in that crate that he brought back from his safari trip? Stay tuned tomorrow for chapter 2.